Hello, welcome to the second Noxious synthesizer tutorial. Today I will present some extra oscillator functionalities as well as other modifier types. We will also create some more interesting sounds. First of all, let's take a closer look at the oscillator section. Noxious oscillator has a special parameter called variation, which, depending on the waveform, lets you sweep continuously through a number of other waveforms of similar type. This is very similar to wave sequences. For instance, on the sawtooth waveform, the effect corresponds to modifying the pulse width on traditional subtractive synths. This is not always the case, and you can try it out on other waveforms to hear the effect. Okay, let's continue by selecting the Dirac waveform. This waveform is very special as it has a perfectly flat spectrum, as you can see here. Now it's also very interesting as its variation parameter has a very dramatic effect on it. Let's hear it. Now it may sound as if we had just pitched down the waveform, but it isn't exactly the case. You should also notice that the spectrum now totally lacks of medium and high frequencies. Before we go further, it is important to understand how these waveforms are created in additive synthesis. This is the simplest of all possible sounds, just a single sine wave, here played at C3. Similarly to the structure of chords, all sine waves of frequency multiple of C3 sound harmonious when mixed with this simple sine wave. These harmonious frequencies are called harmonics. Here, for instance, is the second harmonic, the same sine wave but played at double the frequency, which corresponds to an octave higher. In the same fashion, here are the third and fourth harmonics. And if we mix all four together, each one with a decreasing level, this is what it sounds like. This should sound to you like a heavily low-pass sawtooth. Sure enough, if we continue adding up more sine waves of increasing multiple frequencies, we end up with our familiar sawtooth. What happens if all those higher frequency sine waves aren't pitched to a multiple of C3, you might ask? Well, you get unmusical inharmonic sounds like this. In the end, additive synthesis is all about mixing, or adding, sine waves of various level and pitch, thus the name. These inharmonic or unharmonic sounds are great for metallic or sound effect sounds, by the way, so don't throw them away too fast. Slightly off-tune harmonics can also create nice beating or chorus effects too. Back to Noxious now. In Noxious terminology, each one of these individual sine wave is called a partial. The total number of partials determines the richness or complexity of the waveform, but too many partials demands more CPU power. The partial count parameter of the oscillator lets you balance between quality and lighter DSP load. Putting it to high adds some more partials in the high frequencies to play with. Not a very pretty sound yet. While we are on the oscillator section, a nice parameter to play with is the width. It controls how wide in the stereo space your waveform will sound. Okay, now back to the modifiers. One of the most useful and powerful modifier type is pitch harmonize. What it does is move the frequency of each partial towards or away from its nearest harmonic. This is most useful to turn an inharmonic sound into a musical one, like ours. Once again, you can control which partials are modified with the center, spread, and fall-off parameters of the modifier. Here, I will configure my modifier to modify only the low-frequency partials, the ones which are most important to determine the overall pitch of the sound, while gradually keeping the high frequencies inharmonic with a high fall-off value. Now that we've got this pitch harmonized on the modifier stack, set to a high amount, we can play with our waveform variation while being confident that our sound will stay musical. Okay, I would like to create a sound with a nice bright percussive attack and a softer sustain. That's classic territory if you are used to subtractive synthesis. We just need to turn on one of the filters, put it on low pass, and modulate the cutoff with one of the modulation envelopes. We might as well also adjust the amplitude envelope sustain level to emphasize this attack. The next thing I would like to have is a more bell-sounding attack. Very rigid instruments, like bells or mallets, have their higher harmonics more and more detuned to the upper frequencies as we go up in the spectrum. We can recreate this by using the pitch scale modifier. It enables you to push away or pull towards the center frequency, the modified partials, depending on its amount parameter. With a high fall-off value, an amount set to pull towards, and a center set to the medium-high frequencies, this modification can be gradual, as our partials get nearer to this center frequency, just like we want to. Don't hesitate to use the display to visualize this. By default, it displays the level of each partial and their position on the spectrum. If you toggle to pitch, you can also visualize how harmonic your partials are. If a partial has its pitch representation in the middle, it is completely harmonic. The more it is above or under the center, the more it is inharmonic, overtuned or undertuned. Here you can see the effect of the pitch harmonize modifier. Okay, time to listen to what we're doing. Alright, that seems nice, but we can still revert to the classic equalizers to give the sound a more specific color. Let's cut some medium frequencies and boost the low ones. I like that. Let's play around with the oscillator variation to see if we can get some nice adjustments. It's always nice to turn off all the modifiers to listen to where we came from. That's it. Until next time.